Well, welcome. I'm Eric Herzog, Vice President of Business Development Evangelism and Vice President Global Channels for the IBM Storage Division. We've got a very interesting session in this week's Mid-Market Tech Talk. For those of you who've been with us before, we do this once a month, the first Thursday of every month. We've had a number of great topics. We've talked about real-world application performance with flash system technology. We've had several sessions on cyber and data resilience. And today, I'm going to be joined by Jeff Barnett, Program Director, and Parker Wall, our Product Manager, about IBM Storage as a Service. You're going to be something very unique, very dynamic, something that's flexible, something that's incredibly agile, except you're not sacrificing any of the normal enterprise-class data services and enterprise-class data functions that you need to run your company. Now, for any of the new attendees who haven't joined our sessions before, please make sure we have your mailing address. People will be getting a new IBM mug for those of you who haven't attended before in the past. So without further ado, one other thing, we will be taking questions at the end. You will notice, of course, in your WebEx that there is no Q&A button, but there is a chat button. So you could please put your questions into chat, and we'll roll through the questions at the end of today's session. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'd like to start with Jeff. You know, Jeff, storage as a service can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So how would you at the high level, we're going to go deeper, of course, during our discussion, but how would you at the high level describe IBM's storage as a service?
Eric, that's a good question. So our goal with introducing storage as a service was to, in essence, deliver an on-premises cloud-like solution that looks and feels a lot like using services on the cloud. So it simplifies the administrative experience with a set of services. It's got a consumption or pay-for-use pricing model like the cloud. It's based on a true services OPEX pricing model. So, you know, those are kind of the key attributes that really define what a storage as a service is.
Great. So now it sounds like from a consumption model, if I'm an IBM customer, am I still going to have the other two options of leasing and traditional buying along with storage as a service?
Oh yeah, you know, we're not preferential to any approach. So you can buy, you can lease, you can do storage as a service. We also have just a simple pay for use that's not a service, but you can pay as you consume. So, you know, we're trying to give customers, you know, our clients the options that fit, you know, their needs in the best way possible.
Now, if I'm can I consume in multiple ways at different locations? For example, storage as a service and then lease somewhere else. Is that allowed by IBM? Can we do that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, you can deploy storage as a service in your own data center and a colo center. And storage as a service itself can be extended to the public cloud with technology we call Spectrum Virtualized for Public Cloud. So there's a lot of options, but then you can intermix. So you could have a storage as a service deployment in one data center that you're replicating the content over to a standard purchase in your DR site or out to the public cloud with our Spectrum Virtualized for Public Cloud capabilities. So lots of flexibility, Eric.
Excellent. So Parker, storage as a service sounds pretty darn complicated. You know, it's definitely a different way of consuming, right? Everyone's used to buying. Everyone's used to leasing. That's what they've been doing for years with computer storage, with their servers, with their network infrastructure. And this sounds awfully different. Is this hard to do? Is it easy? And how do I get started?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's all coming down to what the defined workload is you're looking to support. You know, we have kept the procurement part of storage as a service so simple. We've defined it in 3 separate tiers, and to where you're really just letting us know what capacity in IOPS per terabyte that you need. And then from there, we're going to configure it for you to meet your requirements and deploy it in your infrastructure. in your environment. So we have really tried to meet the very efficient procurement process that the cloud era has developed the market towards. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So speaking of that, since it's a cloud-like model, yeah, I'm used to that a little bit. How do you bill us? How would you bill my company if we go with IBM Storage as a service? Is it just like the cloud? Is it different? How does it work from a billing perspective?
You know, oh, sorry, Jeff.
I'll take that one. So the billing is very simple. There's a well, first of all, when a customer signs up, they'll sign up for a base capacity subscription, and that equates to their, I'll call it, core needs. So let's say a customer is looking to get off of an old storage system and they've got 150 terabytes of data that they're going to migrate into the new environment. So let's say they sign up for 150 terabytes as a base subscription. There would be an annual payment that would be paid over the term. And literally, we have terms from 1 to 5 years. You get a better price if you sign up for longer, pay a little bit more if you sign up for shorter. Then any usage above that base capacity will be billed on a consumption basis, using the average usage each month, up or down. So it's very flexible. Now we deploy day one around 50% more capacity than the customer signs up for their initial capacity level. So that gives them room to grow day one. Now, as they use that extra 50%, we will monitor it. And if that usage goes over 75% utilization, we'll ship out and install more. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to give a cloud-like environment, but for an on-premises solution. So when you use the cloud, you can grow and grow and grow your usage, and the environment, is there for you. Now, obviously on-prem, we're not going to deploy, thousands of petabytes day one. So we deploy extra to start, and then we're trying to stay ahead of the client's consumption so that it simulates the cloud. And that's why we also do the periodic technology refresh. We want to keep the technology current.
Okay, so now you mentioned both a base and what sounds to be variable. If I don't use any of the variable, do I just pay the base price? And how does that kind of work? Because it sounds like I've got a buffer to use, but if I don't use it, or is there some sort of billing for that buffer? How does that work?
So the buffer is literally there for your use, to meet your needs when you grow. If and when you grow, you pay for it. If you don't grow, then you don't pay for it.
So just now, one of my buddies was looking at another storage as a service, and he said something like, if you use the variable, there was like a premium. What's that about?
Oh, that's a good point. We saw a lot of, I'm going to call it, draconian approaches to the way some other vendors approach their model, and they don't always disclose these details up front in their marketing. So one of them that you're pointing out is most of them have a base rate. Let's call that a dollar per terabyte per month that's associated with that base subscription, kind of the capacity that you sign up to begin with. And let's say it's $100 per terabyte per month, just to use round numbers. Well, most of them also charge a premium when you grow, and it's usually 1.5 times that rate. So in this case, it'd be $150 per terabyte per month. So as you grow into that capacity, you have to pay more than you paid for the base. We saw that as complex, because if you wanted to avoid that, you could bump up your base level, but then if you bumped it up, you couldn't shrink. And it also meant that the customer had to monitor their usage and bump up their base capacity level, to avoid that. But we decided to be super simple. Our usage rate or variable rate is exactly the same as the base. So there's no, quote, penalty to use capacity above the base. And the other thing I should point out is most of our competitors also charge on what I'll call effective capacity. That's the server view of capacity. So if the server stores 100 terabytes, but the physical system only takes 50 terabytes because you're getting 2-to-1 data reduction or compression, the vendors that are charging on effective, they're basically keeping all of those benefits of compression for themselves. We're charging on the physical usage. So if your data compresses really well, you're going to save money. Now, if your data doesn't compress, the vendors that are charging on effective, they were planning on benefiting from your data reduction. More if the data compressed a lot, a bit less if it didn't compress well. But it turns out if the data doesn't get compressed at least 2-to-1, then our competitive providers, they charge a 2.5 times rate for any data that doesn't compress well. So they kind of, benefit from how well your data compresses, and then if it doesn't, they benefit there again. We eliminated all that by charging on the amount of physical capacity actually used, same rate for the base and the variable usage, and no penalties whatsoever.
Wow, so that seems way easier and way less confusing. And I'm not paying premiums. Sounds like if I don't get good data reduction, I pay a premium. And since IBM Storage charges on the effective, or sorry, on the actual usable versus the effective, if I use the other guy, I'm going to pay for 100 terabytes for sake of argument. But if it's compressible, if IBM only pay for 50. So it sounds like it's actually, can be will end up as a heavy discount compared to the other guys in the industry.
That's right. That's right. When we do side-by-side price compares, whether the data compresses a little, a lot, or anything in between, we come out costing less when you do the conversions between our physical price and the benefit of how well the data compresses. So, we just chose that model because we figured it was more transparent, more fair, and we weren't retaining the benefit of how well the data compresses from our clients. We were just passing that on and avoided all those penalty rates.
That's great. So I've got a question for Parker. There's
Right.
lots of type of different companies: healthcare, services, manufacturing. Is IBM Storage as a Service designed to be used with all types of customers or only specific customers? How would I know how to decide if I'm, for example, an IBM business partner with all kinds of different customers? Can anyone use IBM Storage as a Service? Is only for certain types of companies?
No, absolutely. It's 100% for everybody. We're going to see interest from small to top Fortune companies as well. And we've designed the service to be scalable in all directions. And this is mainly because, again, going back to Jeff's point about our pricing and bringing our customer-centric services approach to this, we're also seeing market trends such as IT personnel moving to more generalist roles specifically, and for middle market customers that are going to see that type of human capital issue, this is going to be a great solution for them. So I would say we're going to see this across multiple industries and in different market sizes as well.
Okay. Now, obviously, based on what Jeff said, this is just a different way to consume the award-winning IBM Flash Systems portfolio. And I know if I buy it, I've got all kinds of enterprise class data services, compression, data rest encryption, all kinds of features. When I get storage as a service, though, do I get that, or is it really just getting capacity? Do I get all the things that I get if I buy something or lease it, or is it some sort of dumbed down version when you do it as a service?
I'll take that one. So this service is basically a full all-in, based on our flash system technology. So everything you can get with our flash system, it is all in. The software is included. External virtualization is included. It's, the new safeguarded copy is included. It is an all-in solution. And it's all included in the price. So there's no, list of things that you check off and your price point goes up and up and up with all those items. In addition, it's not just, the system and the software we're providing, but we're providing a set of lifecycle management, which means IBM is going to install the environment. We're going to help the admin set up storage insights. We're going to be doing proactive alerting of problems, before they occur. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be monitoring and sending out more capacity as it grows, doing the tech refresh. So those set of services, as Parker was mentioning, will help the generalist not deal with those, I'm going to call them annoying low-end tasks to get the system set up, to do firmware updates, to try to optimize the system. We're going to take over a lot of those tasks on behalf of the administrator.
Okay, so a follow-up, obviously earlier in this panel discussion, you mentioned multiple ways to consume storage as a service, and you could still lease and still buy. So when I do the storage as a service, it sounds like I'm still getting the same thing as if I buy it. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, you're getting the same technology as though you bought it, with all these services wrapped around it. So it's another option for clients to consider. Depending on their situation. Do they want something that's more OpEx oriented? Do they want something that will reduce the number of procurement cycles they go through? And they just want to pay on a $1 per terabyte per month basis. Now I will point out that, for customers that might want to get, I'm going to use the word GORPy. If they want to get in there and specify their configuration, meaning how much cache and which drive and all those technical details, then this is not a good solution for that, because literally, when Parker was describing that you get one of 3 performance tiers, those are performance levels that IBM is saying that we will deliver, that our customers will buy. We're determining what we actually ship and install. So we're taking on the task of figuring out the system configuration, and we do that to meet the service levels. So some customers like to get GORPy and want to have all the specification detail. One of our other procurement models is probably better for those clients, but for ones that want it like the cloud, when you get the cloud, you don't get into the technical details of what the cloud provider provides as far as the servers and storage behind the cloud.
Right.
So that sounds like when I buy these service level agreements with IBM Storage as a Service, it's essentially the same way I would order things from a cloud provider, right?
Very similar.
Okay. Now you mentioned earlier, but about the Parker mentioned the different tiers. So how do you know if I'm an end user, how would I know what tiers to use? That's the first part of the question. And the second question is, if I have different workloads, could I put some workloads on one of the tiers and a workload maybe that's not as fast on a different tier, a different price? How does that all work as far as selecting the tier, and can I put different data on different tiers?
Yeah, so we've provided guidance on the kind of workloads that align with each tier. Obviously, you could think about, I'll start with, what we call tier 3, or our balanced performance tier. That can be considered a kind of a general tier that could be used for streaming, could be used for backup, could be used for a lot of different things that aren't real challenging. And then as you move up through the tiers, you could get into, your high performance database and analytics workloads and use our highest performing tier. We call it tier 1, or the extreme performance tier. And then we have a tier in the middle. Now we've enabled our partners, to have those conversations with clients on what their workload needs are, and then to select, one of the three tiers. And we document what we call an IOPS per terabyte. Think of that as a scalable metric. So whether you start with 100 terabytes and grow to 500, or you start with 500 and grow to a petabyte or 2 petabytes, that metric applies. So when a customer requests a larger environment, we will deploy more infrastructure to generate at least that same level of IOPS per terabyte. So it's a scalable metric. So, that's basically how people select the different tiers. Now, we did something nice as well. What happens if a customer selects, let's say, tier 2, and then they realize as their workload grows that they really needed something faster. So a year into their agreement with IBM, they're coming back and saying, this was working great at first, but now our workload is becoming more demanding than we thought. We make it very easy for a customer to upgrade to a higher performing tier. So we'll allow them to end the contract early, and we'll deploy new technology. Let's say if they have to move to tier 1. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can. Now, customers, I think your other question was, can they use multiple tiers? Yeah, you could deploy, the slower tier, and I don't want to say it's slow, it's still flash based, but they could deploy our tier 3 technology for some workloads, and then have another tier that might be tier 1 or our extreme performance one.
So now, since I'm choosing on this SLA based on the performance tier, you had mentioned that there is a number assigned with that. So is that the best case, like with the wind at my back running down the hill, or is that the worst case that for sure I'm going to get that?
So on the IOPS per terabyte, it's actually the worst case. So we document it as a minimum IOPS per terabyte. And if you step back and think about it for a moment, it's an IOP per terabyte. And what does that really mean? Well, that means what can the system push through, and then how many terabytes are in the system. So our calculation is actually very simple. We figure out the worst case for every controller we would deploy of capacity, meaning the denominator, the terabytes. And then we know from our own performance analysis, what are the IOPS, for the defined workload that we define for that can drive through it. And then we say, let's divide the worst case situation where that system is loaded to the max, meaning we grew it in the customer shop to it being fully loaded with drives. And we divide those terabytes by the system's ability to drive IOPS. So it's a minimum IOPS per terabyte. Now, I will point out some of our competitors use a maximum IOPS per terabyte tied specifically to just the base capacity. So they're saying if you sign up for 100, here's our maximum IOPS. You would see only tied to your base. We're really saying here's the minimum, and it ties to all the terabytes that you could grow into, where we may be filling up each controller or deploying more controllers over time to yield a minimum IOPS per terabyte level.
Okay, so in short, if I understood this right, that sounds like, since mileage varies based on how the driver is, and performance varies by workload, if I get a minimum performance and the workload actually will go faster, do I get benefit from that better performance on that specific workload? And if I do you charge me for that, or do I just get it for free?
Well, that's a good question. So yeah, if we deploy a system that maybe has half the capacity in that system because your needs are such that the amount of terabytes we need to deploy only fills up half the system, for example, then in theory, order of magnitude, your IOPS per terabyte could be double what our IOPS per terabyte claim is, because we're figuring what's the worst case when that system gets fully loaded. So you'll get that benefit if you maintain that level. Now, as you grow your terabyte usage and we add drives and fill that system up, you could then approach our minimum IOPS per terabyte level. And that's all assuming that your workloads were based on our performance metric. And of course it's an artificial metric of 70-30 read writes, blah 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 blah, which of course no workload is exactly that characteristic.
But that sounds like, since you're giving the minimum amount, if my workload ends up, and I can measure it, and my workload actually is better than that IOPS per terabyte, I essentially get that better performance at no charge.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, Parker, question for you. Obviously, if I'm going to put my primary data on there, I've got to protect it. So how would I protect the data that's in the IBM Storage as a Service? Do I just do regular backup with Spectrum Protect or whatever backup software I have? How to make sure that I'm backing that data up? How does that work?
I mean, aside from being the leading flash system when it comes to securability and data resiliency options, we've got encryption enabled machines and also safeguarded copy with the Spectrum virtualized software. So we do have the means to keep your data completely secure while it's in our systems.
Now, do I do regular backups like I do when I buy the storage? Would I still, back, in addition to doing this data resilience, just the regular backup that I've been doing for years, do I back it up as well or not?
I believe so. Jeff,
Yeah, really,
would you be able to speak more on that?
Yeah, I mean it's just like any other system you would acquire. So this is a new model to acquire it. You'll be getting this as a service solution. How you decide to back up, if you decide to set up a DR site, that's still your choice as a client. So all the normal backup tools that work with flash systems work here, both from IBM, Spectrum Protect, and if you're using Veeam or other third-party tools, they all work. If you're setting up a DR site, that works. That can either be 2 storage as a service deployments, one in your primary, one in your DR site, or as I mentioned earlier, you could use a different purchase model for your DR site, or use our Spectrum Virtualized for Public Cloud as your DR location, and use that technology.
So now, obviously, storage can be, difficult to manage. There's a lot to do around it. And obviously, if I'm getting the service, what part does IBM manage and what part do I manage as the company who's leveraging the service? How do you decide who manages what, or do you have a definition of that already?
Let me take that. So I'll say that the line in the sand is at the data. So we do no actions in managing where we're touching the data. So we have no access to client data, which means we're not provisioning volumes, because to be able to provision volumes, you would be accessing data. As we mentioned earlier, we're not backing up or doing the DR. Now we enable that, but what we're doing is we're really taking over all of the maintenance tasks. So everything is IBM installed. Its hardware maintenance is completely done by IBM, so we don't send out drives. But we come out and, if a drive fails, we replace it on site. We don't require the client to stay up with firmware updates. We assign a technical account manager that'll work with clients, both to guide them on best practices in using the system, but also when it's time to do a firmware update, they'll coordinate that with the client. But IBM will perform that firmware update using a remote firmware update facility that's included. So we're really trying to take a lot of the maintaining the infrastructure, and that's what we call it life cycle, right? Install, keep it healthy, look for problems before they occur to maximize the availability characteristics, refresh it when needed, grow it when needed, no procurement cycles, client just keeps paying the dollar per terabyte rate. So we grow it and until they're done. And then we also make it easy for clients, to continue to renew. They can renew their terms, and we'll keep the infrastructure in place and refresh it, again as they need. Again, just making it in essence, a permanent on-premises cloud-like environment.
Well, this sounds so easy to use. It sounds like I don't need to be a global Fortune 500 to leverage this. I can just be a small shop with an IT generalist, because Parker pointed out it's set up for the IT general. So if I'm not a big company, this still works for me, right? Storage as a service, Parker, would it still work for me if I'm, Herzog's Bar and Grill? Is that, or are you only selling it to the Fortune 500 type accounts?
Nope, it'll get you into the latest technology at a very price sensitive point, and it'll scale with you as you grow. Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. So now, obviously, there's been a lot of acquisitions, whether big, medium, and small. They're on the internet, in the newspaper. For those of us that are old enough who still read a physical newspaper. So if I buy another company, can I add them to the service as well? And how would I, look at the tier then? What would I do from that scenario?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. So certainly, if you have your initial tier, maybe you're a small company, Herzog's Bar and Grill, and you started with, let's say, 50 terabytes, and you were growing, to maybe 60, 70 terabytes. Maybe we added a little capacity, but now this other company is bringing in another 100 terabytes, and you start using more. Well, as you use more, no problem. As you consume, when you reach the limits where we say 75% utilization, we'll add more. But if you tell us, oh, I want to migrate data in that's larger than what I have, you can engage with the technical account manager, and they'll let us know that you need capacity to grow faster, and we'll arrange to ship out more capacity to grow that, so that you can migrate in that data from the company you acquired.
Okay. So now all I just do is call up this technical account manager you mentioned, and say, we bought this other company, we're going to need more capacity now, and then you guys take care of it.
We take care of it, obviously within reason. If you were at 100 terabytes and you said, I need a petabyte now, we probably have to have a deeper conversation around that. But
yeah, you'd have to change the contract. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So there are some limits on that, but generally, we're going to be proactively monitoring and reaching out to you to add, but we wanted to make that so it could be two-way, where from a client perspective, you see a future need that might be larger than the buffer that's already installed. So we want you to be able to reach out to us and say, I've got a growth need, not enough capacity there to meet it. Can we get some more installed? And within reason, we're going to be, saying absolutely, let's help you meet your needs.
Okay. Well, this has been an outstanding discussion. I'm sure we've got some questions that are going to come through in a second. I've got one last one. Obviously, a lot of the IBM end users buy from the IBM business partner community. Do I buy this from a business? If I've already been buying from a business partner, now I want to, keep buying some, as you mentioned, but now I want the storage as a service for part of my needs. Do I just call that same business partner, or do I call IBM directly? How do I do that?
Parker, you want to cover that one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We can go through both channels. Our business partners can be set up, or we can set you up with a business partner if you don't have one already, and get you the need and support, or you can come through an IBM channel as well, and you will get the same level of service.
Yeah, we actually expect, Eric, most of our sales of this to be through partners. We a lot of mid-market, and large customers will be interested in this. So
Right.
our partners have been very excited about the offering, because it's really super differentiated, relative to other similar offerings in the marketplace. So they're very excited to work with our mid-market clients to help them leverage this new approach to acquiring storage that they deploy on premises.
Mhm.
This sounds very, very straightforward and very exciting. It's then there's a lot of noise all over the universe about as a service, as a service. Obviously, it started with the software companies, but now every system company is trying to do the same thing. So it's very interesting, and I can see there's clearly a lot of variety. I mean, when you tell me that if I need extra capacity, other guys are going to charge me for it, charge a premium, and you're just going to charge me the regular price. Boy, that doesn't sound good. And when you mention that if I have a workload that doesn't compress well or doesn't deduplicate well, they're going to charge you a premium for that. Where it sounds like if that doesn't, because workloads vary just like mileage. So it sounds like if that workload is not very dedupable or very compressible, that IBM absorbs that. Whereas the other companies would charge me a premium. I mean, they're going to charge me extra, it sounds like, from what you said. It sounds like this storage as a service is certainly much more comprehensive. And it sounds like what you've avoided is the hidden fee, right? It's like when you buy the car, right? You go to buy it and they talk to you about 47 things that was not on the sticker price on the car that they want to charge you for. It sounds like that's what the other guys do. And what we do is whatever it says on the car, that's what we charge you. Right? We have no hidden fees.
Absolutely. And, to your point about how the growing competitiveness of this offering to what we're currently seeing in the market, it's projected by 2024, 2025 that 50% of IT infrastructure will actually be OpEx based or as a service. And, the rapid growth that it will take to get there, especially with on-prem infrastructure, that's why we are truly deploying a customer-centric approach to this, because it's just going to get more and more competitive, and it's going to be the services that truly bring customer value that make it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Parker and Jeff, I'd like to thank you very much for the main part of our panel. Now what I'd like to do is see if there were any questions from the audience. So Ryan Quinn is going to help us out there. Ryan, are there any questions that came in on the chat window that you'd like to tee up for us, please?
Yeah. Hey, Eric. Hey, everybody. We've got 4 questions. First one is around support and what that looks like. Wondering if ECS or enterprise class support is included, or if there's different levels or options for customers.
So there is a single, it's an all-inclusive offering, and as I mentioned, it's lifecycle managed, and part of that is the technical account manager, which really goes beyond what customers may have known as enterprise class support. So this technical account manager will really be the facilitator to help the client optimize and maintain that environment at its highest availability level. So that's included for all 3 tiers and any size that we support. There are some minimums on the base subscription, and they range from 25 terabytes to 100 terabytes, depending on the performance tier. But the service levels are identical across all 3 performance levels and any of the sizes of capacity that a customer signs up for.
Okay. Ryan, any other questions?
Yeah, for Jeff, just because you just finished answering that one, another one from you from the same person. You had mentioned streaming, it says, and it says, is that streaming video or streaming analytics?
Yeah, and that was streaming video that I was referring to. And so there are different workload characteristics. Some of these are documented in our product documentation. And again, at the end of the day, you want to have and this is big value of our business partners. You want to have a conversation about your specific workload, because one customer's workload type and another that might be in the same type might actually require different performance tiers. So, there's some general guidance around workload types, but again, you want to optimize to the specific workload that each customer has in selecting the right tier.
Awesome. So there's three more questions here. One of them is around timeframes of the subscription. In particular, for a movie production workflow, do you offer short-term subscriptions for, a project, something like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, our very shortest is 1 year. So if somebody only needed it for 3 months, that wouldn't be a good fit. Given, well, unless they can handle doing a 1 year subscription. So we don't do like 6 months or 3 months. I don't know how long it takes to do a movie. Maybe more like 9 months to a year. But we do as short as 1 year. And it's only marginally more expensive than, let's say, a 2 or 3 year time frame. Roughly on a dollar per terabyte rate, it's about 5% lower price for each year longer. And so if that movie is a 1 year project, then certainly the 1 year time frame would fit well.
Awesome. I'm going to condense two of these together. Both have to do with competition. So one is saying, do we have a side-by-side comparison of our offering versus competition? And then just your take on what differentiates ourselves from, let's name it, what Pure offers in this space.
So let me take that one. I hope many of our customers might consider joining our Tech U event, where we have a lot of sessions that get into a lot of different topics. I did a session, or am doing a session on that topic exactly. How do we compare against other providers? So that's a great opportunity to see that. Now, if you'd like to, have a one-on-one, engage your partner, and they can certainly arrange for me to share that, one-on-one. Now, as far as differences from Pure, a lot of these tie to the things that we've talked about. So Pure charges on effective, meaning they're keeping the benefit of how well the data reduces or compresses. They charge the higher rate for the usage above the base. They also charge the penalty rate if the data doesn't compress. And all of that adds complexity, right? And risk. Imagine the situation where you're using a database, and at first it's getting data reduction, and then the database has a feature to encrypt the data, and because it's encrypted by the system, the data is no longer compressible. Now all of a sudden you're paying a 2.5 times rate because it's uncompressible data. That's what can happen with Pure. With IBM, let's say you were getting some data reduction. If it didn't reduce, yeah, it cost you a little bit more because it's not being reduced, but you wouldn't get zinged with a 2.5 times penalty. So those are the key differences. I will point out one more thing. Across the board, I think we're trying to be the fair, honest, and transparent leader from a pricing perspective. We've also done something, I'm going to call it super extraordinary in our terms and conditions. So if you do sign up for, let's say, a 3, 4, 5 longer term commitment, that's not a commitment that you can't get out of. Most of our, actually, I'm going to say all of our competitors, if you sign up for a 3 or a 5 year term, you're committed to doing the base subscription over the full term. And if all of a sudden you move all your data to the cloud, you're going to have to pay, you can send the equipment back, but you're going to have to pay that remaining full payment for the base subscription you signed up for. We have something that is just super, super customer friendly. We provide a discount, a lower rate if you sign up for 5 years or 4 years than if you sign up for 1 or 2. But if your plans change and you signed up for a 4 year, and after 2 years your CIO makes you move all the data to the cloud, we're going to let you out of that contract and not charge you for all the remaining time on the base. The only thing we're going to ask is that you compensate IBM back and the partners that were involved for the difference in the discount you got. So we're basically saying, if you end in 2 years and you had a 5-year term, pay us the difference in the discount rate you got between 2 and 5 years, versus paying all that amount for future usage that you're not going to be able to take advantage of because you moved all your data to the cloud. So that's really a best-in-class ease of cancellation option.
Yep. Our goal is not to punish the customers. It's like we want to support you as well. So,
yep.
And that's how you do it.
And any other questions?
Yeah, I think this is the last one. Asking around if we involve switches with our solution for customers, or if that has to be acquired separately.
That is a good question. So we're very similar to others in the market that the offering is around the storage system itself. We are looking at what we might be able to do in the future on switches. I will point out that we're also looking at extending this model to other platforms in the IBM portfolio. So this is around our flash systems or block storage approach. We've got our Spectrum scale-based ESS systems for file and analytics workloads. We've got cloud object storage. We've got our systems for high-end mainframe workloads. We're going to be extending this model across those, and we're also looking at what do we do with switches.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'd really like to thank the panel for being here today to talk about IBM Storage as a Service. It sounds very, very unique and very, very differentiated. At the same time, it sounds like IBM is giving the customers multiple flexibility. You can move to a cloud-like consumption model with storage as a service. You can continue to purchase and buy on the CapEx model, and you can lease. And it sounds like you can mix and match for mid-sized to larger companies. So lots of flexibility there. Again, I'd like to remind everybody, if any of your fellow could not attend, right? They could not attend to us. We will have this posted on the Mid-Market Tech Talk YouTube channel that IBM runs, and that will be posted up tomorrow. Also, don't forget, for those of you that are new, to make sure we have your mailing address, we can send you the actual mug, the IBM mug that is part of this. And again, we appreciate everyone taking the time to be with us today. And remember, there'll be another Mid-Market Tech Talk first Thursday of November. Thanks again, and thank you for joining.
Awesome. Thank you.